Hello and welcome to the 15-minute show, part of the Arsenal Therapy podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam Keys, and today we are going to be talking about Declan Rice following his victory at the Premier League Awards, the London Football Awards, after he won Player of the Year. So before we start, please hit the like button on this video. It really helps us. Please hit the subscribe button and, of course, the notifications to help you guys keep coming back. But without further ado, let's dive into Declan. We're going to do a bit of a look at the award. We're going to look at what he's achieved this season for Arsenal and ultimately what he has done to help Arsenal become the best side out of possession in the Premier League and arguably in world football. So first up, the award itself. It was a big night. He was named Player of the Year for the 2023 year. But it's one of those, these awards are very strange. They happen mid-season. And I think Postecoglou, winning Manager of the Year, may have kind of taken a bit of the shine off the award because, I mean, what's he actually achieved? But Declan spoke at the awards and said that he feels Arsenal have really learned from last year, that Arteta, the coaching staff, the players, there's a real mentality to win at the club. And that's what we're going to look at, is what Declan Rice brings to Arsenal and why he has helped us become such a winning machine recently. And obviously, he's in the form of his life right now. Right now, if you look at his goal involvements, 10 goal involvements this season, 4 goals, 6 assists for Declan. It's a big season, and he's coming up at big moments for Arsenal as well. That's a big part of it. And when you look at what he did this year and what he's done last year at West Ham, this is his best season for goal involvements that he's ever had in his career. Last season, he had 6 goal involvements in total. And this year, despite playing 11 less games so far, he's already had 9 goal involvements in the Premier League alone. His other one came in the Champions League as assist in that competition. But again, we see him hitting more shots. He's taken 2 more corners already at this point this season. He's created 2 more chances from set pieces. And that's a real threat that I don't think any of us saw whenever we signed Declan Rice, was that set piece threat, the supreme technique from corners and free kicks that we're seeing. He just keeps getting better with each game. And of course, who could forget the 2 big moments? So it's not just that he's creating chances and he scored some goals. The goals have come at big moments. The winner against United, which last night in his interview, he said was his biggest moment for Arsenal. The size of the game, what it meant, getting that goal in the last minute, it won us the game. And obviously, Jesus went on to score. But then the Luton game as well, that was 3 each at the point. It was literally the last kick of the game. A free kick comes in, and Declan Rice rose above everyone, headed into the bottom corner. These are the moments that you look to your big players for. And whenever you've paid £100 million for a big player, that's when you want them delivered. Is in the biggest moments. We saw him score against Chelsea as well to help get us back into the game. Obviously, the West Ham goal came late in the game, and it was kind of a nothing goal, but it meant a lot to him and probably every Arsenal fan as well. But again, when we look at his involvements this season, no player has had more Premier League assists than Declan Rice in 2024. So that is 2 months into the new year, and Declan Rice is leading the assist race. So he's someone that his inclusion with corners, free kicks, it's really taken him up a level, and it's really showing more value than just what he does in that midfield area alone, which we are going to come and look at now. But interestingly, if you look at his heat maps this season for Arsenal versus West Ham, he's obviously central positioned, but he's very left-sided orientated. You can see in the heat map just how congested it is out on that left-hand side of the pitch, where he was getting the ball, playing more of a double pivot and driving forward down that left. He was trying to win the ball in the left half of the pitch, and he's a lot less congested. Whereas when you look at Arsenal, this is the definition of a centre midfielder. This is someone that gets the ball and bosses it in the middle of the park. Off it, he's involved. He knows when to bring himself into the game. That's one of the biggest things about Declan, is his ability to concentrate. This is Declan Rice's biggest superpower, is concentration. And that concentration comes before everything else. It allows him to know when to be involved in the game and when to step back. But because he's always switched on, he knows when to anticipate. He knows when to use his physical strength. He knows when to carry, because he's so switched on. He understands the game state at all times. And it also allows him to know when to make tackles, when to make certain types of passes. And his passing range is something that's vastly improving as his time at Arsenal goes on. And with his anticipation, which is obviously one of his biggest things, I just picked some moments from big games. So you see the first one against Newcastle last week, how quickly he is. One of his big powers is his anticipation. When the ball's coming to the receiver, he's already set off. He's running towards that ball. And when the players come in to receive it, he gets in just before them, and it really allows Arsenal to win the ball high up the park. He can do the same in the defensive third. If you look at the second picture on the right here, it's against West Ham, again, just past the halfway line. He gets that ball, he kills it, and he allows Arsenal to carry it and create an overload against West Ham and really keep them penned in. Again, against Liverpool, we see the opposite. He's in his own defensive third. It's one of those Harvey Elliott's getting the ball, just straight in, gets that hook and leg around him, wins the ball. Arsenal are off. As you can see, Havertz and Odegaard right beside him. And we've got a close, tight midfield here. And we really can turn things on Liverpool as a result. And again, we see the bottom right picture. He's just so quick in his involvement. And again, Saliba's lost it here. It's Rice that's alive to the danger. Straight on it. He's like, nah, we've lost it. I'm winning it back. You're not going to play. And these are skills that very few players have. Look, Declan Rice's physical profile is an interesting one because he's strong, he's fast, he's tall, he's physical. But there's other players with that physical makeup. That profile does exist. There's very few that have his concentration and anticipation levels. That's what takes Declan Rice from being a very good DM to being someone that can boss things as a six. And the biggest part is knowing when to get involved, when to set off, and when he needs to put that cape on and be the driving force behind the Arsenal team. And obviously, his tackling, his anticipation, that's what we know about him, and that's what he's really famed for. But there's so much more, as we can see here, where he just adds things. So again, when you look at his anticipation, these are things in his own box. Firstly, the block off the line against Brentford. This is something that's kind of been forgotten about, but this was in the first 5 minutes of the game. Ramsdale, really shaky start, give the ball away. Brian Mbeumo has only one place he can actually put the ball, but Gabriel does very well to cover the near post. Declan Rice straight on the line, cuts it out and clears it. We win that game 1-0. Had we have gone 1-0 down at that point, who knows what would have happened, because we were really struggling to open Brentford up and create chances that day. Again, this one against Liverpool in the middle, this has been memed all over the internet, but Declan Rice is running back. It's a case of if he makes the tackle, Salah's got multiple options here to play the pass. But what Declan Rice does well is make Salah make the decision. Saliba's coming back to cover. He's cutting off the Salah's left-hand side. So the only real option Salah has is to beat Rice or to play an inch-perfect ball to Alexander-Arnold, which he ends up doing. But the reason this is so impressive is because Rice does everything by the book and makes sure that Salah has to execute at that level. Ultimately, Liverpool don't score and we get away with it. And again, we come away with a draw in this game. But then the big one, again, against City, this is very early on in the game. It's Rice on the line from a header, clears that ball. These are, again, City, we beat them 1-0. These are three big moments in games that one we've drawn and the other two we've won 1-0. Had Rice not have made these actions early in both games, we could possibly have been beaten in each of them. There's a good chance we wouldn't have come away with the 3 points. But alongside his defensive qualities, we've got the carrying ability. This is something, again, we knew we were getting from Declan Rice. Again, you see him the way against Newcastle, two big players around him, doesn't care. Off he goes. He's got his motor running and he just takes off. Against Brentford, the same thing. Or against Bournemouth, Brentford, very similar. Running through the middle of the park, carrying it into space. But again, in the right-hand corner, you can see in the Champions League, two players around him yet again. He's able to really get that ball and charge. And in the Champions League, where if you are transitional and you're able to operate in that way and really move things quickly, it's a huge advantage because there is more space at times to run into. There's less teams playing with you with a low block. So those transitional opportunities are very, very vital. And Rice is a player with his carrying power that gives Arsenal something completely different, because Thomas Partey is more of a glider with the ball. He can make his way up the pitch. The issue with Partey is he can't get back in the same way Rice can. Rice is a bull. He's a tornado up and down the pitch. And whenever he gets it and he carries it, more often than not, you see him knock it off. He's not scared to play a sideways pass once he's run 20 yards and just make sure we keep possession. Similarly, if he does lose it, he's often straight back on his bike and wins that ball back. But passing wise, he's someone that at West Ham we saw, I would say, a big range of passing. He had the most big switches in the league. We saw both feet crossfield passes all over the park. And it's impressive to watch, but ultimately, big switches don't always work. And if you're playing against the low block, all a big switch does is gives the opposition time to settle. If you want to play that ball crossfield and into space, you need to really drive the ball and get it there quickly. Big switches, yes, they move the ball slightly quicker, but they're not the most effective way of playing. And when you play against a low block, you often don't have that opportunity. But what we're seeing from Rice is 3 very, very similar passes from the edge of the box over in that right half space, where he gets it, bit of space, comes and he plays it in. He hasn't got an assist from this position yet, but it's coming. Don't get me wrong. First one, Nketiah tried to chip the keeper against Palace, put it straight over the ball. One of the worst shots you'll see this season. Again, the next one into Trossard, led to a good save from Pickford, didn't lead to anything. And again, the last one against Fulham, on a day where Arsenal were really poor, but again, it was him trying to unpick that lock. This top one's an interesting one because he gets the ball, drives forward, and he plays a lofted pass over the top to free Martinelli and really got Arsenal in behind. But these are the things that Declan Rice isn't known for, and they're the things that the verticality in his game is definitely improving, and it's something that he wasn't being tasked with at West Ham. But at Arsenal, it's a big part of the game. We don't want him to be playing high-risk vertical passes all the time, but having that in his locker in games when sometimes you are required to do something a bit different, this is where him improving in that kind of aspect of his game will really help. But interestingly, when we look at Rice and compare him, so I've done a comparison here, what he's doing this year at Arsenal versus West Ham. And the first up, you see his in possession stats. And we're going to look at his out of possession, his defensive numbers straight after this. So firstly, his number of touches per game, over 10 touches a game more. He's losing possession around 1.5 times a game less. Goals similar, shots similar. But his passes attempted, he's having 13 more passes attempted per game. He's completing 14 more passes per game. His passing accuracy is up, even though that he's attempting a lot more passes per game. And this is something that I don't think people have really registered with Rice, is the challenge. He went from playing in a sort of a fairly negative side that didn't play with loads of possession. West Ham averaged just over 40% of possession last season. Arsenal are a team with generally over 60. And he's playing high touch volume football. He's playing very positional football as well, in a way that he wasn't at West Ham. He's got a lot less freedom at Arsenal than he did at West Ham. At West Ham, it was, let's put the cape on, let's give it to Declan, and let's get him to really get this ship sailing. At Arsenal, he's part of a unit. And he's a big, big player in that unit, but he's someone that he has to play his role in the team. And that's something Arteta is very keen on. Every player is very positionally assigned, with a lot less room for freedom than you have at some other teams. But with, which is why we're not seeing someone like Declan have the kind of same impact in certain situations that he maybe had at West Ham, where he was playing like Steven Gerrard at times and doing these big drives. At Arsenal, he does them on a more selective basis. But again, we're seeing him have more forward passes and ultimately more passes completed in the opposition half, with over 11 passes per game in the opposition half. That's a very high stat, and that's something that you would expect, because Arsenal are playing around the halfway line at the beginning of their build-up. So you are seeing Declan get the ball higher up the park naturally. So, but this is what's really interesting, because this is why stats need to be interpreted properly. So you look at this, ball recoveries, he's making 4 less ball recoveries per game. And some idiots would look at that and say, Declan Rice isn't as involved off the ball. They would take stats from lesser players that at maybe smaller clubs like Chelsea, for example, and say Caicedo's making more ball recoveries than Declan Rice. He's making more tackles per game. And instead, and say he's contesting more ground duels. What these stats actually show is that Declan Rice is having to do a lot less. He's not having to make those recoveries. 9 recoveries per game is a massive amount of recoveries. And at a club like Arsenal, you shouldn't have to make that many. This is all coming down to concentration as well. So he knows when to get involved. He knows when he has to sit back. And when you look at these numbers, he's having to do a lot less defensive work than he did at West Ham. He's having to remain positionally disciplined. His role is to be switched on when the team counter against Arsenal, when the team win the ball back, when we're in a defensive structure. That's when we need Declan Rice being involved in these defensive duels. But primarily, a lot of the ground duels he's winning are coming because he's charging and he's anticipating, and he's quicker to the ball than the opposition. He's quicker than the receiver. And because of that, he is able to go out and really dominate teams. And that allows Arsenal to keep the ball high up the park. It allows us to really operate in the final third, and it prevents teams getting out. And that's what we saw against Liverpool. We saw it against Newcastle, against West Ham. None of them could get out of their own half because we just had them penned in. And a big reason for that is because of the aggression of players like Rice, and then how cleanly they win the ball to ensure that Arsenal can keep the ball. We can keep playing and we can keep penning teams in. But ultimately, look, there's areas for improvement in Declan's game. But those areas, we're talking minor tweaks that can be used to improve his game overall. And the reality is, if he can add kind of 2% to his passing, increase the verticality, add a bit more creativity, we're talking about an all-timer here. This is a player with insane talent who can play as a 6, he can play as an 8. And one of the other important things to remember is we talk about Thomas Partey last season. For the majority of the season, he played with Granit Xhaka and Martin Odegaard. Those two played nearly every game. This season, Declan Rice has played with Martin Odegaard, Kai Havertz, Fabio Vieira, Smith Rowe. He's had Jorginho in there. So he's adapting to different players around him all the time. And he's done it seamlessly. He's done it with ease, as the 9 Man of the Match awards this season have shown. So ultimately, this is a player who is just going to keep getting better. He's going to keep improving, and his mentality and his willingness to learn is what makes him such a big player for Arsenal and for England, of course. But look, we'd love to hear your comments. Put them in the chat. Let us know what you thought of the video. If you disagree, tell us that as well. We want to know. So yeah, Declan Rice, absolute monster, and hopefully he leads to a title as a result of these supreme performances. And he's a big reason why Arsenal's goals conceded and XG against are so low in comparison to our title rivals. But thank you for watching. Please hit the like button on the video and please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow this and helps us coming back with more content and trying to make it better each time. Have a good day. Thank you.